The rain fell in heavy, deliberate sheets, like the sky was punishing the earth for something it had long since forgotten. People scattered, umbrellas snapping open, taxis screeching at curbs, shoes splashing through puddles on the slick sidewalks of San Francisco's Market Street. It was chaos. It was noise. It was everything Sophia Jennings had tried so hard to rise above. And yet here she was, stranded, soaked, alone. Sophia stood at a bus stop she'd never noticed before, not far from a shuttered bookstore with a cracked window and a rusted "Help Wanted" sign. Her black coat, tailored in Milan, stitched with her initials, was now soaked through, clinging to her like it didn't belong to her anymore. The hem of her skirt darkened from the rainwater that had begun to collect around the curb. She reached into her designer tote bag for the 5th time, her fingers searching with a kind of desperate disbelief. Lipstick, keys, a business card she didn't recognize. No wallet. She checked her phone, black screen, dead battery. Her charger had been left in the sedan she'd exited 30 minutes ago, rushing to a last-minute investor meeting in Soma. For a woman who controlled billion-dollar deals with a single email and ran a company that had once been on the brink of collapse until she saved it with nothing but grit and intellect. This moment, felt like some kind of cosmic joke. Sophia Jennings didn't lose things. She didn't get stranded. She didn't wait for public transportation like everyone else. But today, the universe had stripped her of all her armor. She inhaled sharply and looked up at the sky like she could glare the clouds into retreat. Her expression was unreadable, somewhere between fury and disbelief. If a camera had captured her in that moment, she would have looked almost cinematic. A woman at the end of her tether, elegant even in frustration, standing in defiance of a world that had just this once told her no. And a few feet away, someone was watching. Daniel Mitchell stood under the narrow awning of the bookstore, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his worn hoodie, his jeans flecked with dust from a long day's work. He wasn't trying to stare, but something about her made it hard not to. She didn't belong here. Not at this bus stop. Not among the pigeons and the peeling street posters and the smell of wet concrete. She looked like she'd walked straight out of a magazine ad and into the wrong neighborhood. Still, he could tell she wasn't just another rich woman lost in the city. There was something more complicated etched into the lines of her jaw, the way she squared her shoulders like she was trying to pretend she wasn't unraveling. Daniel had seen desperation before. The loud kind, the messy kind, the kind that screamed for attention. But hers, it was quiet, controlled. The kind that came from someone who didn't know how to ask for help because they'd never needed to. That's what made him speak. "You, okay?" he asked, his voice low, almost reluctant. She turned toward him slowly, like she didn't expect anyone to notice her. Her eyes scanned him, taking in the hoodie, the stubble, the soft calmness of his posture, before answering with a tension-wrapped voice, "I lost my wallet." It was an admission that cost her something. Pride, maybe. Control. Daniel nodded, glancing at the dead phone she gripped too tightly. "No friends nearby?" She hesitated. "Phone's dead." He let out a small breath, half a laugh, like he knew exactly what kind of day she was having. He reached into his jeans pocket and pulled out a few crumpled bills. His last 20, a couple of ones, some change he hadn't counted since lunch. He held it out without ceremony. "Here," he said. "For the bus." Sophia blinked, confused. Not because she didn't understand what he was doing, but because no one had done something like this for her in a very long time. Not without strings, not without expectation, not without knowing who she was. "I can't take that," she said automatically, recoiling from the money like it was something fragile. "You can," he said. "And you should." His tone wasn't forceful. It was gentle, matter of fact. The way someone speaks when they mean something and don't need to convince you of it. She looked down at the money again. Wet fingers, rain-slick palms. Her world was spinning sideways, and this man she didn't know, offering her the simplest gesture of kindness, was the only thing that made any sense. She took it. "Thank you," she said, barely more than a whisper. He shrugged like it was nothing. "Pay it forward sometime." But it wasn't nothing. Not to her. As the bus groaned to a stop, splashing water across the sidewalk, Sophia hesitated for a fraction of a second before stepping on board. She turned just as the doors hissed shut. Through the foggy glass, she saw him, still standing, there, still watching her, hands in his pockets, no expectation, no recognition. He didn't know. He didn't know that she could have bought the entire transit system 10 times over, that the leather handbag she clutched was worth more than the average American's mortgage payment, that her name sat on Forbes's top 40s, under 40, list 3 years running. That in every room she entered, people stood straighter, spoke faster, tried harder to impress. He didn't know. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Sophia Jennings didn't want him to. As the bus pulled away, the city swallowed his silhouette, but his presence stayed with her, tucked somewhere unexpected, somewhere in between her ribs and her heart. A tiny crack in the walls she had spent her entire life building, because something had shifted. Because somewhere in the middle of a chaotic rainy street in downtown San Francisco, someone had seen her. Not the CEO, not the brand, just her. And that terrified her more than anything else. The morning after the rain, San Francisco felt deceptively calm. The sky was painted in soft pastels and the streets gleamed as though the city had been washed clean overnight. But inside the top floor of a glass tower overlooking the bay, Sophia Jennings sat still in her office chair, untouched by the gentle quiet beyond her windows. Her coffee had gone cold. Her inbox, as always, was full. Proposals, reports, partnership requests, all vying for her attention. And yet her mind couldn't seem to focus on any of it. She kept replaying the moment in her head. The rain. The bus stop. The man with the soft voice and calloused hands. She hadn't even asked for his name. That detail irritated her, more than she was willing to admit. She didn't even know who he was, what he did, where he worked, why he had offered. Help without hesitation or expectation. People didn't do that. Not in her world. Sophia lived in a constant game of calculation. Every conversation was a negotiation, every smile a strategy. But Daniel Mitchell, though she didn't yet know his name, had disrupted that without saying more than a handful of words. He had simply given. No ego, no interest in recognition. Just kindness, unpolished and startlingly sincere, and it stayed with her. She glanced at the sleek modern clock on the wall. She had 15 minutes before her executive roundtable. Normally, she'd be mentally rehearsing every data point and decision tree. But today her mind lingered elsewhere. She wondered, was he thinking about her too? Sophia hated not knowing. Later that day, she walked into the conference room, her heels striking confidently against the marble floor, her posture impeccable as always. Conversation halted the moment she entered. Department heads straightened. Assistants moved with practiced efficiency. This was her domain, and everyone in it knew it. But someone, drew her attention to the far corner of the room. A man was kneeling near an HVAC vent, adjusting a tool bag beside him. He was dressed in deep blue work coveralls. His sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that hinted at physical labor. He stood, turned, and in an instant her breath caught. It was him. Sophia's eyes locked onto his face. There was no sign of recognition in his. No double take. No awkward pause. He gave her a quick courteous nod and went right back to work. To him, she was just another executive. Nothing more. And that did something to her. Something unexpected. Throughout the meeting, Sophia found herself only half present. Her mouth moved. Her mind followed the charts and forecasts well enough, but the rest of her was somewhere else entirely. She kept replaying his expression. Calm. Focused. Unbothered. How could he not recognize her? Or did he recognize her and simply not care? When the meeting adjourned and the room began to empty, she didn't leave. Instead, she moved toward the far wall where he was packing up his tools. "Excuse me," she said, her voice controlled but warmer than usual. He looked up. This time there was a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Yes, ma'am." She nearly rolled her eyes. "You can drop the ma'am. I get enough of that from people who think I'm 50. He chuckled softly. "All right. Sorry. Force of habit." "What's your name?" she asked, trying to sound casual. He hesitated a beat. Daniel Mitchell." Sophia nodded like she was logging the information somewhere important. And she was. "How long have you been with Jennings?" "Almost a year," he said. "Facilities, mostly HVAC and systems maintenance." She folded her arms lightly. "You helped me yesterday, at the bus stop." His face remained neutral, but something in his eyes shifted. "I figured it might have been you. Wasn't sure. And now? I'm sure." There was silence. Not awkward, just suspended. as if the air itself was waiting to see what she would say next. "Well," she said finally, "thanks again for what you did." He nodded once. "No problem." She turned to leave but paused. "I'll see you around, Daniel," and with that she walked out, her heart inexplicably light. In the days that followed, Sophia started noticing him more. Not intentionally at first. A glimpse of him adjusting a security panel in the hallway, fixing a thermostat outside the boardroom, carrying a toolbox through the lobby. It was as though he'd always been there, invisible to her, until that one moment in the rain changed everything. Now she looked for him. Sometimes their eyes would meet, briefly. A nod, maybe a polite smile. Never more. But something had started to simmer beneath the surface. Quiet, patient, unassuming. She learned things slowly from the few shared moments they had. He was quiet but not shy. Observant, grounded. He moved like someone who wasn't, trying to be anywhere else, and that both puzzled and fascinated her. She didn't understand people like that. People who were content. People who didn't seem to want more than what they had. Sophia had built her life chasing more. More control, more success, more certainty. And yet Daniel, he seemed untouched by that hunger. It didn't make sense. And yet, the more she saw of him, the more she realized how little sense her own world made when compared to his. She didn't know why she started taking the long way to her office, or why she found reasons to pass by the maintenance wing when she didn't need to. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was something else. Something she didn't want to name yet. But every time she saw him, something shifted inside her. Something unmoored. Sophia Jennings was not the kind of woman who got flustered. She had walked into rooms full of venture capitalists and made them sweat. She had negotiated mergers that other CEOs had failed to close. She was iron-willed, composed, a force. But Daniel Mitchell, quiet, unassuming Daniel, was beginning to unravel her in ways she hadn't expected. And the strangest part? She didn't. Wanted to stop. He didn't ask about her title. Didn't try to impress her. Didn't seem fazed by who she might be. He spoke to her like she was just another person in the building. And for reasons she couldn't explain, that felt more valuable than any title, any accolade, any billion-dollar valuation attached to her name. Sophia didn't know where this was going, or if it was going anywhere at all. But she knew one thing. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking 3 steps ahead. She was thinking about now, about Daniel, and about what it might mean if she let herself follow the quiet pull towards something real. The hum of the vending machine masked the soft voices coming from the other side of the break room wall, but Daniel Mitchell wasn't really focused on the machine anymore. He'd fixed these enough times to do it by muscle memory. What caught his attention now was a name that hit him like a punch to the chest. Sophia Jennings. She was just featured in Forbes again. Crazy, right? CEO of Jennings Innovations. You'd never guess it from the way she blends in here. Daniel froze. The coil of wire in his hand slipped slightly, and he had to clench his jaw to keep it from shaking. He kept his head down, listening. She's intimidating, but kind of a legend. Started the company with nothing but a software prototype and a rented co-working space. Now she's got investors chasing her like she's the next Elon Musk. Yeah, the other voice said with a chuckle. And have you seen her? Total. Powerhouse. Beautiful, smart, ruthless in the boardroom. I wouldn't even know what to say if I ran into her. Daniel slowly closed the panel on the machine and stood up. His breath caught somewhere in his chest. The faces of the 2 young marketing guys chatting in the hallway blurred in his peripheral vision. All he could see now was that moment at the bus stop. The rain. The desperation in her eyes. The way she clutched her bag like it was a shield. And how she'd looked at him. Not like someone important or famous or untouchable. Just a woman. Having a hard day. And how he'd helped her. He had no idea until now. Sophia Jennings, the woman he'd given a few crumpled bills to, wasn't just someone working upstairs. She was the upstairs. She owned it. She ran it. And she never told him. That realization sat like a weight in his chest for the rest of the day. He went back to work, but everything felt hollow. Every time he passed someone in a suit, every time he caught a glimpse of her name on an office plaque or email, it was like the walls around him shifted slightly, reminding him just how far removed he was from that world. He didn't see her that day, or the next, but when he did, The shift in him was undeniable. She approached him in the hallway near the elevator bank, the same casual tone in her voice. "Hey, Daniel." He turned, forced a polite smile. "Miss Jennings?" Her brow lifted slightly. He could see the flicker of confusion, of hurt, flash through her before she masked it. "You okay?" she asked, her voice quieter now. "Fine," he said, stepping aside. "Just a lot on my plate." Then he walked away. It wasn't just avoidance, it was self-preservation. Daniel had always believed in staying in his lane. Work hard. Be decent. Keep your head down. You don't get disappointed if you don't expect anything. But something about Sophia had made him forget that for a moment. And now all the air between them felt tainted with something heavy and sharp, like betrayal. She hadn't lied, no. But she'd let him believe she was someone else. She'd let him feel like they were equals, and now he knew better. He didn't want to be a footnote in someone else's story. Not hers, not anyone's. Sophia, on the other hand, felt the coldness immediately. She'd always prided herself on her ability to read a room, to spot tension from across a table. But this was different. It wasn't professional distance. It was personal. Like something between them had snapped and he was pretending. It had never been there at all. She spent the next few days trying to make sense of it, oscillating between frustration and heartbreak. She wasn't used to being misunderstood. Not like this. And certainly not by someone she had begun to trust, even in ways she hadn't intended. The thing was, she hadn't kept her identity from Daniel to manipulate him. She'd done it because, for once, she wanted to be seen outside the blinding light of her name, her money, her influence. She wanted someone to talk to her without an angle, to look at her without expectation. And Daniel had done exactly that, until now. The tension built, slowly. They passed each other in hallways with only curt nods. Her attempts at small talk were met with deflections. He avoided eye contact. He retreated like a man who had realized the house he'd been standing in wasn't his after all. The moment that broke her came late one evening. She was working late, walking toward the parking garage when she turned a corner and heard his voice, low, frustrated, talking to someone on the phone. "She's amazing, okay? She's different. But I can't be that guy." Pause. "I don't want to be some charity project in her life story. The guy she helped out once. That's not who I am." Another pause. Longer this time. "I have to do something with my own name first. I need to prove I'm more than just a guy with a wrench." The call ended. She stepped back out of sight, her chest tight, her breath held like a secret. It wasn't that he didn't care, it was that he didn't believe he was enough. That realization broke something open inside her. She'd expected resistance, maybe even resentment. But this was deeper. This was a man wrestling with his own sense of worth, his place in a world that had never handed him a single shortcut. And for once, Sophia didn't know how to fix it. She couldn't buy her way into his confidence, couldn't write a check that would silence the doubts in his head. If he didn't believe in what they could be, then nothing she said would matter. So she did the hardest thing she had ever done. She let him go. She stopped seeking him out. She stopped waiting for him in the elevator or walking the long way past the maintenance wing. She turned her attention back to her work, back to the world that had always made sense, even if it didn't feel the same anymore. But nothing, not the accolades, not the mergers, not the endless string of meetings, could fill the space he had quietly left behind. Daniel had walked away because he believed it was the right thing to do, and Sophia had let him. Because sometimes the only way to love someone is to let them fight their own way back to you, even if it means waiting in silence. The silence between them had grown thick, almost tangible, like a wall neither of them could name but both refused to climb. Sophia Jennings went back to her meticulously structured life, moving through board meetings and investor calls with the kind of precision that had made her a titan in Silicon Valley. On the surface, nothing had changed. Her company thrived. Her schedule remained relentless, and the world kept seeing her as unstoppable. But inside, something had fractured. It wasn't just Daniel's absence that gnawed at her. It was the knowledge of why he had left. He hadn't rejected her because of arrogance or resentment. He had done it because he didn't see a place for himself beside her, because he didn't believe he was enough. And there was nothing she could say to fix that. She tried to forget him. She tried to silence the questions in her mind, the ones that surfaced at the end of long workdays or crept into her thoughts during quiet elevator rides. Was he okay? Did he still think about her? Did he regret walking away? Or worse, had he truly moved on? It wasn't love yet. Or maybe it was. Maybe it had always been in its earliest, rawest form. Love without confession, love without permission. Weeks passed like that, until one rainy Thursday afternoon, Sophia's patience cracked. She had just finished a quarterly strategy meeting. When she passed by a hallway she never used anymore, a corridor leading to the lower levels of the building. Her feet paused on instinct, heart stalling. For a moment, she thought she could hear his voice, somewhere in the memory of that space. And then, without planning to, she turned down the hallway. The maintenance area was warmer than she expected. The air smelled like metal and dust, the kind of scent that clung to people who worked with their hands. Daniel was crouched near an open panel, sleeves rolled up, his shirt damp with sweat. His jaw was tight, his eyes focused, but there was something about his body language, something heavy. She stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching. He hadn't seen her yet. And in that second, she saw him not as the man who had walked away from her, but as a man who carried the weight of responsibility alone, without ever complaining. She saw the way his muscles tensed as he adjusted wires, the way his brow furrowed in thought. And beneath all that, something softer. The man who had once handed a stranger his last few dollars and asked for nothing in return. She stepped forward. "Need a hand?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. Daniel froze. Slowly, he turned to look at her. His eyes flicked over her face, her tailored blouse, her hair slightly windblown from the storm outside. For a long time, he didn't say anything. "What are you doing down here?" he asked finally. "I could ask you the same," she said, a gentle attempt at lightness. He didn't smile. "You don't belong in this part of the building. And yet here I am." He stood brushing off his hands. The silence that followed felt like a standoff. "I didn't lie to you," she said, more quietly now. "You didn't have to," he replied. "You let me believe something that wasn't true." Sophia's chest tightened. "I never meant to deceive you. I liked the way you looked at me, like I was just a person." Daniel's jaw twitched. "You are a person, Sophia, a remarkable one. But that doesn't mean we belong in the same world." Her eyes flickered. "And who gets to decide that, you?" "I don't want to be someone you pull out of the dark when it suits you," he said, his voice rising just slightly. "I don't want to be some moment in your story that makes you feel human." "That's not what you are," she snapped, her composure finally cracking. "You think I'm trying to fix you? I'm the one who's been broken since the day you stopped looking at me like I mattered." He looked at her then. Really looked. And what she saw wasn't anger. It was fear, doubt, longing. They stood there, breaths shallow, years of different lives hanging between them like fog. "I don't care about the titles," she said. "I don't care about the money or the headlines or the investors who think I'm a machine. When I saw you that day, I didn't see a maintenance worker. I saw someone who noticed me when no one else did, someone who gave without asking. You reminded me what kindness looks like in a world that forgot it." Daniel exhaled, dragging a hand through his hair. "Sophia, I don't want to be dependent on anyone, especially not someone who has everything." "Then don't be," she said, "but don't shut me out because of your own fear." There was a long pause. "I need to earn it," he said at last. "I need to become something first. On my own, not because of you." Sophia stepped closer, her voice soft but fierce. "Then prove it. Not to me, to yourself." She didn't wait for an answer. She turned and walked away before the tears in her throat could rise. Not out of weakness, but because she had finally understood. This wasn't a love that could be forced or begged for. It had to be grown, earned, believed in. The next morning, Daniel enrolled in night classes at a local business school, HVAC certifications, entrepreneurship, basic accounting. He worked double shifts when he had to, slept less, studied more. Slowly, a blueprint began to form, not just for a company, but for a future that was his. Sophia never said a word, but she knew. There were no grand gestures between them after that. No confessions. Just a quiet current of understanding that they were both waiting, both moving in their own lanes, hoping one day they'd meet again at the intersection. Sometimes they passed each other in the building, offering nods that lasted just a heartbeat longer than they used to. Occasionally, they had coffee in the courtyard, careful to keep things light, safe. But behind every word was the same unspoken question. Are we ready yet? Neither of them knew, but they both hoped the answer would one day be yes. It had been nearly a year since Daniel Mitchell decided to disappear. Not from the city, not from his job, but from the spaces where Sophia Jennings' presence lingered too close. He had retreated to the quieter corners of the building, spent less time near the executive floors, and more time in the lower levels where people didn't whisper when he walked past, where no one measured him against the woman he couldn't stop thinking about. But even in the silence, she never truly left him. She lived in the smallest things. In the song that played on his walk home that she once said she loved. In the vending machine he repaired outside her conference room. In the email alerts he ignored announcing another win for Jennings Innovations. Her company, her empire, her name on everything. And yet, despite all that, the image that haunted him wasn't her in power. It was her in the rain. Vulnerable, real, entirely human. That was the version of her he had fallen for, and that was the version he had run from. Because no matter how much he tried to convince himself otherwise, he had been afraid. Afraid that loving her meant giving up who he was. Afraid that one day, when the glamour wore off, he would simply be a shadow in her life story. So he did what he knew how to do. He built, quietly, relentlessly. Daniel enrolled in night school studying business management, HVAC engineering, and entrepreneurship. He worked long shifts, then stayed up even longer to draft business plans to learn what it would take to own, something that couldn't be taken away. There were nights he wanted to give up, when exhaustion made his vision blur and doubt clawed at his resolve. But in those moments, he remembered her voice, then prove it, and he kept going. Months passed. He registered a business, got a loan, took on small contracts. Slowly, piece by piece, he built something real. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't big, but it was his. Mitchell Systems, a small but growing company offering independent building maintenance and smart energy solutions. It started with one client, then 3, then 10. He moved into a modest office space and hired his first employee. Still something was missing. Success felt different without her. He told himself that he'd let her go, that it had been the right thing to do, that they came from different worlds, and it was better this way. But the lie never held for long. The truth always found a way back to him through a dream, a memory, a sudden ache in the middle of the night. Then one evening, after a long day of back-to-back meetings and site visits, he sat alone in his office, watching the city lights flicker like stars. In his desk drawer was a bus ticket, unused, dated from nearly a year ago. He had kept it without knowing why. Now he did. He took a pen, wrote a note on the back of an old invoice, folded it carefully, and placed it inside an envelope along with the ticket. Then he addressed it. To Sophia. The message was simple. I've changed, but one thing hasn't. I still love you. He didn't expect a reply. But 3 days later, he was standing at the same bus stop where it had all begun. Hands in his coat pockets, wind threading through the city like it was searching for something. And then he saw her. She came into view like a memory rising back into the present. No limo, no entourage, just her, hair slightly windblown, eyes searching. Her heels clicked faster as she got closer, and he didn't move. Couldn't. He felt rooted to the ground and untethered all at once. When she reached him, she didn't speak. She just looked at him as if taking inventory of all the changes and none at all. He swallowed. I wasn't sure you'd come. She smiled, the kind that cracked open something old and tender. You sent a ticket. Daniel laughed softly, more out of disbelief than humor. I thought it might be too much. Sophia shook her head. It was exactly enough. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The city moved around them, cars honking, people rushing, someone playing saxophone on the corner, but between them, time seemed to pause. I didn't know how long to wait, he said finally. I didn't know if I wasn't waiting, she interrupted gently. I was watching. His brow furrowed slightly. You think I'd let you go without paying attention, she continued. I saw everything. I wanted it to be your journey, not mine. Daniel looked down, emotion catching in his throat. You did it, she whispered. You built something from the ground up. You stood on your own. I had to. You always could, she said. You just didn't believe it. He looked at her then. Really looked. She hadn't changed much. Still elegant, still composed. But there was softness in her eyes now, a quiet vulnerability he hadn't noticed before. Or maybe he thought it had always been there and he just hadn't been ready to see it. Does this mean? He began. Sophia stepped closer, closing the space between them. It means, she said, if you still want to try, I'm not going anywhere. Daniel's breath trembled, and for the first time in a long time he allowed himself to feel everything. The pain, the growth, the longing, the love. He reached for her hand. She took it without hesitation. It was strange how something so small, fingers finding fingers, could feel like the most significant thing in the world. They didn't speak again for a while. They just stood there, watching the city, together, side by side, no longer divided by fear or pride or circumstance. Because this time the timing was right. They had both fought their way back, not just to each other, but to themselves. And now they could begin, for real, from the only place that mattered, right here. This story reminds us that love isn't about matching lifestyles, it's about meeting hearts. Sometimes the biggest obstacles are not the differences between us, but the stories we tell ourselves about what we deserve. You're enough even if you're still becoming. And the right person will see that and wait for you to see it too. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support fuels us to keep creating soul-stirring stories that speak to your deepest truths. See you in the next one.